On March 18th and 19th, when the China-US high-level strategic dialogue was held in Alaska, the European Union took the opportunity to raise the flag for the United States, in an attempt to slander and attack China. On March 22nd, the European Union, the United Kingdom, and Canada each used the so-called Xinjiang human rights issue as an excuse to announce unilateral sanctions on relevant individuals and entities. On the same day, the United States announced sanctions on 2 Chinese government officials in Xinjiang, claiming to be a supplement to the sanctions of Europe, Britain, and Canada. Faced with such unwarranted accusations, the Chinese government has fought back forcefully. China has decided to impose sanctions on 10 persons and 4 entities that have seriously harmed China's sovereignty and interests, and maliciously spread lies and false information. In fact, their so-called evidence is completely maliciously fabricated by some anti-China politicians and so-called scholars. The so-called compulsory sterilization evidence mentioned in their report, in 2018, 80% of the new cases of IUDs in China occurred in Xinjiang, which is obviously inconsistent with objective facts. The so-called facts they put together are based entirely on the out-of-context, distortion and tampering of China's official documents and data. For example, the Vocational Skills Education and Training Center, established by Xinjiang according to law is a school, and is a preventive counterterrorism and de-radicalization measure taken by Xinjiang. The purpose is to eradicate the breeding ground of terrorism and extremism from the source, which have essential difference with the concentration camps they call. What's more, Xinjiang's current counterterrorism and de-radicalization measures have achieved remarkable results, and there have been no violent terrorist cases for more than 4 consecutive years. In contrast, these human rights judges each have their own problems and their own crimes. In the 400-year-long black slave trade, colonists such as the United States, Britain and France transported more than 12 million people from Africa to the Americas as slaves, and 10 million people died in the transportation. In the United States today, racial discrimination is still serious. Not only are the African American Floyds unable to breathe, it has now spread to many Asians. How can we talk about respect for life? In the 1870s, the Canadian government included the assimilation of Indigenous inhabitants on its official agenda, publicly preaching that strangling Indian ancestry starts with their children, and implemented a policy of cultural extermination against the Indigenous people by setting up boarding schools. According to incomplete statistics, more than 150,000 Aboriginal children were forced into schools, and more than 50,000 of them were tortured to death. This year marks the 10th anniversary of the civil war in Libya. The Libyan war, launched by France, Britain and the European Union, has resulted in the displacement of more than 400,000 people in Libya today, and more than 1 million people are in desperate need of assistance. These countries, which are full of human rights stains, are now acting as human rights judges. What qualifications do they have? Where does the confidence come from? It is extremely absurd. As Hua Chunying, a spokesperson for the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, said, people of all ethnic groups in Xinjiang, China enjoy stability, security, development, and progress. This is one of the most successful human rights stories. After all, Western anti-China politicians are not concerned with human rights at all, and they are not concerned with the truth. Human rights are nothing more than a tool for them to stigmatize China, an excuse for interfering in China's internal affairs, and a cover for containing China's development.